Good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're excited about today's panel and the guests that we'll have speaking. Just a couple quick reminders. The webinar is being recorded today. Everyone is being muted upon entry as well. Please unmute yourself if you do have a question, but we'll be fielding the questions from the chat box if you can locate that function. We have received numerous questions in advance that we'll be posing to our panel today. So if yours doesn't get answered right away, know that we have it kind of teed up that it'll get answered within the presentation, or we have a list of questions that has come in advance. And then we will be sending a link with a password to view both the slide deck as well as the recording of today's session. I'd like to introduce Jeff Fitzgerald, who is the Colorado Division of Unemployment Director. We've got also Jeffrey on his team will be joining us just to answer questions accordingly. And then I have Lisa Anderson with us as well. She is with Energize Colorado, and she'll be assisting in kind of funneling questions as they come in. Jeff, I'll let you take it away from here if you want to give me a second, and I will share your presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Glad we could be here with you today. My name is, as was mentioned, my name is Jeff Fitzgerald. I serve as Unemployment Insurance Division Director. Just by way of background, as you can imagine, the demand for unemployment insurance is really quite large. Understandably so. These are very difficult times, and our division is working very hard to serve as many citizens as possible that need our services. But among the other challenges is that there are new provisions that are provided by the federal government as it relates to benefits for those that aren't typically eligible for benefits. So in addition to having a large number of people that are trying to access services, we've also got a large number of people that have never accessed unemployment insurance benefits ever in their life. And so we understand that challenge, and we're working to get clarity out in the community. So that's why we're excited to do forums like this, where we can reach broad audiences and try to get some information to your hands that helps to navigate that process. So with that, I'm going to launch into a brief, about 15-20 minute presentation that I hope that you find to be useful in addressing some of your questions. If you by any chance joined our virtual town hall on Monday of this week, this presentation is going to look very, very similar. So bear with me if that's the case. So as an agenda, just want to talk a little bit, and I'll modify this and focus in some areas and less so in others. But we're just going to talk a little bit about status of unemployment insurance in the state of Colorado. We're going to talk specifically about the CARES Act, which has a few major provisions, most notably pandemic unemployment assistance. That's commonly referred to as PUA or PUA. And that is the benefits specifically that were rolled out to address individuals that aren't typically eligible for UI benefits. And that might include gig workers, independent contractors, self-employed, and also folks that fall into very specific categories as it relates to COVID-19 and thus cannot work. Also, a major provision of the CARES Act is pandemic unemployment compensation. That specifically is the additional $600 benefit a week. And so we'll get into some information on that. We'll try to address what we're seeing as the most frequently asked questions. We're going to give you a few tips on filing a successful claim. And then perhaps most importantly, we'll get to your questions. Next slide, please. Okay, I'll go through this one rather quickly. Since March 15th, which is sort of when COVID-19 became the problem that it is today, we've fielded more than, this is a little bit dated number, we've fielded more than 350,000 claims and paid out more than $500 million in benefits. This just underscores the enormity of the need in the states, and Colorado being no exception to that. We began taking pandemic unemployment assistance or PUA claims on April 20th. in an effort to help address some of the enormity of questions that people need help with, we did add another call center. Bear in mind that before COVID-19 became a reality, Colorado sat at 2.4% unemployment rate, which is historically low for the state of Colorado. So we essentially went from a very, very low state of unemployment to just a demand that can't even be expressed in terms of a percent growth. And so that was part of the challenge, honestly, is that we were staffed to serve about 2.4% unemployment, and that quickly changed almost overnight. We've worked very hard to staff up our call center, but as it stands right now, the demand for folks trying to talk to live agents, it far outweighs our capacity to handle those calls. And we recognize that. We're working to generate solutions on that front. And hopefully forums like this can help to alleviate the need to have anyone call in. We also began paying out the pandemic unemployment compensation the week of April 20th. I'll get more into that. We have added a file a claim callback form to the website. So specifically, if you're having challenges filing a claim in either regular unemployment insurance or in pandemic unemployment assistance, we've added a form to the website where you can say, I can't reach you via the phone. Here's my issue with filing a claim. Please call me back. We also added a chat bot function to the website. So what a chat bot function is, if you're not familiar, it essentially is a chat mechanism on the website. So we beefed up our website content, recognizing nonetheless that the underlying benefit systems are confusing. Congress has made the interaction of the benefits somewhat confusing. So the detail is there on the website. However, if you're having challenges navigating the website successfully, a chat bot is something you can leverage online. Type in your question, it'll navigate the website for you and help provide frequently answered questions and the like. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into pandemic unemployment assistance, which is a benefit program that some of you on the phone might be eligible for. What is it? It's a new federal benefits package passed by Congress. It specifically is intended to address gig workers, self-employed, and those that typically do not qualify for regular UI or specific circumstances under COVID-19, like I have a spouse that's big diagnosed with COVID-19 and I can't leave my home to go to work because I am caring for this spouse or an elderly parent or something along those lines. How you access it, you go to coloradoui.gov and you would click on File a PUA Claim. What's going to be necessary when you file is to have your 2018 or 2019 tax returns available. You're going to want to actually have them downloaded and ready to upload onto the application. We prefer the 2019. Some people haven't filed those returns. We understand that. You're going to want to create a username and password. And please accept the Experian identity verification. What that does is it's helping us to prevent fraud. Whenever systems like, whenever Congress or benefit systems like this expand, there is a growth in fraudulent activity. So it's imperative that we know who is filing and we verify that the person who's trying to file is in fact the person that's going to get the benefits. If you fail to accept the Experian identity verification, it will delay your claim. Or if you fail the identity verification, it will delay your claim. If you are accepted for benefits on this system, you're going to be requesting payment weekly online, and you do not need a PIN. And this is a source of confusion, so I'll get into this a little bit later, or excuse me, a little bit more. If you are on regular unemployment insurance benefits, you do in fact need a PIN, and you actually will request payments online biweekly. So those are two of the notable differences between PUA and regular unemployment insurance benefits. Next slide, please. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about pandemic unemployment compensation. So what this is new federal benefits passed by Congress. These are federal dollars that are added on to, it's a flat amount of $600 that's added onto every benefit per week, and it applies to both regular UI as well as to pandemic and employment assistance benefits. So it doesn't matter which program you're on. These benefits are in place, and it's a flat fee, so you don't have to be fully unemployed. If you are working less than full-time, which is actually 32 hours a week, and you're getting partial benefits, you would also get the $600 a week on top of those benefits. This is in place as it stands right now through July 25th. Congress may take action to extend that. They may take action to extend it, but lower it to a different amount. We just don't know at this time. But right now it's in place through July 25th. No action, this is another critical part, because this is a question we get a lot. There's no action needed by a claimant to get these additional monies. This will automatically be added to your weekly benefit amount. So for those of you that have active claims, you should be seeing this in your direct deposits or your Relia card already. Next slide, please. So next, I'm going to get into a couple of frequently asked questions. Excuse me. How long will it take me to see my first payment after I apply? So what's going to happen is you're going to go into the system and you're going to apply for benefits. It's going to determine when your first eligible week is, depending upon when you were impacted or when you had an impact to your work situation, be it as an independent contractor or as a W-2 employee. From there, you're going to get a payment request window. And as I said, for PUA and regular UI, those actually are different, because one you file on weekly and the other one you file biweekly. So what it's going to do is, what's important to note is the window in which you apply for the benefits are going to be after your first week of eligibility, because what you're doing is you're going into the system and you are reporting what happened to you the previous week or previous weeks, depending upon which system you're in, to outline if you had any earnings in those period, to attest that you didn't have any job offers, things along those lines. So it's important to understand the cadence of that you're actually going in after your first week of eligibility and then reporting on that before you can get a benefit payment for the previous weeks. And generally what you can expect is, depending upon which system you're in, again, that you're going to get a payment within about a 10 to 14 day window. I'm a gig worker with both W-2 and 1099 income. How do I file? So I'm certain that this is one that probably applies to a number of people that are listening in today. And I want to start by saying that with part of what I opened with, which is that pandemic unemployment assistance, it's a federal program that's administered by the states. So in other words, the state does not provide the guidelines for these programs. It's simply administered by the states. So we have no latitude on the federal guidelines for these programs. So specifically, if you're a W-2 and 1099 income, it doesn't matter what percent the 1099 presents as your total income, and it doesn't matter what percent the W-2 earnings are of your total income. What it boils down to is, if in your W-2 work you earned more than $2,500 in your base period, and that's generally 18 months is your base period. If you earn more than $2,500 in that base period, you must first go through and apply for regular unemployment insurance benefits. When and if you exhaust those benefits and you're no longer eligible for regular unemployment insurance, then you could switch over to pandemic unemployment assistance. The pandemic unemployment assistance requires that if you have W-2 earnings above $2,500, you must go through the regular employment insurance system first. And the two systems do talk to one another. So if you start in the pandemic unemployment assistance application, it's going to check to see if you have any W-2 wages or if you have an active claim in the regular UI. And if you're not eligible for those benefits, it's going to redirect you to to the regular unemployment insurance benefits to go file there. If you strictly have 1099 income, then you would be eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance, and you should start there. This may not apply to many of you on the telephone if you are predominantly independent contractors or gig workers, but the question is, it's an important one, so I'll go over it. My employer wants me to return to work, but I don't feel safe. Can I stay on unemployment? So this is a sort of an it depends situation. So what's going to happen is, so Colorado broadly is under the orders of safer at home as prescribed by Governor Polis. But also within that, appropriately so, the governor has allowed for local counties and local officials to prescribe, in some instances, more strict guidelines than safer at home. And so it's really going to fall into an analysis of what has your employer done. If this is the case, what has your employer done to comply with the guidelines of safer at home and or any county restrictions that are applied as it relates to whether it's safe to return to work. So essentially what it's going to come down to is if your employer has called you back to work, what have they done to ensure your safety at work? Have they put in mechanisms that allow you to distance properly? Have they put in mechanisms and provided you with the capacity to wear a mask or gloves if necessary? And if that's the case, so what's going to happen is it's going to set an issue, if you will, that my team's going to have to look at to determine whether it's safe for you to return to work, given the adjustments that your employer has made, if any, or not. And that's going to determine whether you're eligible to stay on unemployment insurance benefits or whether you need to return to work. I should also mention that part of that factor of consideration is, are you yourself part of a vulnerable population such that there might not be any conditions at present that it is safe for you to return to work, and assume that you will not have undue exposure to COVID-19. Furthermore, I would add, is your living situation such that you're caring for or living with someone that's especially at risk or a more vulnerable population to COVID-19? Those are circumstances we will take into account when determining if you're eligible to stay on unemployment insurance benefits. Once I have filed and been deemed eligible, how do I get my benefits? Sort of went into this. You're going to have to go into the online systems and certify for the previous weeks and request payment in the window, in the time frame that you've been allotted to go in and do so. So that's either going to be on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis. It's really important, don't miss those windows. If you do miss those windows, it creates an issue where you're going to have to probably talk to somebody about what's the good cause reason that you missed your window for requesting those benefits. Why are the two systems online for unemployment? How do I know which one to use? I've kind of gotten into that a little bit. So regular unemployment insurance, that's a system called MyUI. So regular unemployment, you're going to want to navigate to our website. Look, it's going to ask some triage questions to hopefully help you get to the right place in terms of where you're going to file. It's going to say file here for regular unemployment, and that's a system called MyUI. Because of the need to stand up another system quickly, the fastest route to get benefits in people's hands, we actually leveraged a different system for pandemic unemployment assistance. That's why there's two different systems. You're going to want to navigate to the website, look at the triage questions, and then navigate to pandemic unemployment assistance if you're eligible for those benefits. As I mentioned, those two systems do talk to one another, though. Next slide, please. Tips for filing a successful claim. So it's really important. We want you to take your time in these applications, because if you accidentally submit erroneous information, that also is going to create an unfortunate circumstance where you might have to actually speak to somebody to get it fixed. And we know the challenges related to that. I'm sure many of you have experienced the challenges related to that. And so please check the accuracy of your information before you submit certain key things like name, address, key dates. Just make sure all of that information is accurate before you hit submit on either system. Please provide an email address and if prompted, select into electronic correspondence. Under the PUA application, that is the only way to receive service. Under the regular unemployment insurance benefits program, you have an option to select out of electronic correspondence. I want to emphasize that the electronic route is going to be the smoothest, most efficient way to ensure that you're getting the services that you need. And it's really going to expedite the process for us if you elect into electronic correspondence. So please do that. Have your tax documents ready to upload. I mentioned this before. The 1040 document, if you're an independent contractor, that's probably the most likely tax document that you're going to be requested. So please have your 1040 ready to go and ready to upload. If you don't have it ready to upload at time of application, again, it's going to slow down the process. Have a valid Colorado identification ready as well. You will not have to upload that, but you're going to have to input. So for example, the preferable one is the driver's license. You're going to have to input your driver's license information or another state issued document into the application. I mentioned this already. For the PUA claims, please accept the Experian identity verification. This is us trying to help with fraud. It's in your best interest to take this. It'll slow down the claim if you don't take it or if you fail it. Please check your spam folders. Sometimes our emails that prompt action get routed to your spam folders. So please check your spam folder and allow for our emails to come through. Not all, on the next bullet, not all of our emails will require responses, but where there are responses needed, please be timely in communicating back to us on those. Also important, I mentioned this, less relevant for independent contractors or excuse me, self-employed, but report all offers to work and any earnings during your regular weekly and biweekly certification. So that is an imperative part of the process. So if you have partial earnings of any sort, whether you're an independent contractor, a gig worker, or if you're a traditional W-2 employee, you must report your earnings as you go in and certify. You also must report any offers to return to work, because as I said, those will have to be looked at and by my team in terms of whether your benefits will need to continue. Next slide, please. Okay, before I get into participant questions, I know we've got some that we've got some that have been provided for us in advance, but I've been asked to talk a little bit about PPP as well as UI and how those two systems interact. And so I am not a PPP expert. I want to make that abundantly clear that no one on my team is a PPP expert. But I will provide you with what I know. So to start, you can't be using those two, unemployment insurance as well as PPP simultaneously. Those are both essentially income replacement mechanisms or partial income replacement mechanisms. So you cannot be using them both simultaneously. I know that there are windows when you get your PPP loans that you must utilize those funds within a certain window. I'm not an expert on when that window is. That's really a question that's best answered by SBA or someone along those lines, or your bank lender.
Hey, Jeff, just quickly
yeah.
On that note, when a company receives a PPP loan, can benefits be suspended for 8 weeks and then be reinstated again on unemployment? That was a question that came in on the chat.
Yeah, okay. So I'll probably defer to Jeffrey on this question, but essentially, Jeffrey, they could just stop filing for benefits for a period of time if they're getting the PPP, or they could just go in and cite, I've got 100% income replacement via the PPP, and therefore I'm not eligible for benefits this week. Would you add anything or clarify anything on that, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest option, you don't have to keep filing and entering those weeks because it'll give you just a disqualification for the week. If you stop, it may have you just reopen the claim after that 8-week period where it'll go through, verify that you're still out of work due to COVID or one of those pandemic reasons, and it will start loading up new weeks after that point. So I would say whatever, if you're if you're not going to claim on any benefits for 8 weeks due to the PPP program, once you hit the Saturday of that week that is covered by the last amount, just go back into the system like you would using your social security number and the password that's provided if you're on the PUA application, and it will walk you through the next steps.
Thanks for that, Jeffrey. So you can, in essence, you can utilize both PPP and UI benefits or PUA benefits. You can back them up end to end, but the bottom line is you can't be on both those government programs simultaneously. Are there any other questions relative to PPP, Lisa, that we got that would be helpful for me to go over now?
Yes, the stimulus check, is that included as income as well as EIDL, the economic injury disaster loan?
So the stimulus check from the IRS, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, that is not counted against income in determining their any benefit wage eligibility for that week, correct?
Right, that's not a payment for work that was completed, so that shouldn't have an impact.
Question to follow up with that. On the EIDL, does that also that can't use the unemployment and EIDL at the same time, like the PPP?
Can you remind me what EIDL is?
Emergency, it's the other one from the SBA.
Economic disaster loan.
Thank you. That is directly given by the SBA that they say I qualify for, but there's been nothing to respond back. So I might get $1,000, but so does that also apply like the PPP does?
I'm less familiar with that particular program, but essentially if that, and I'll defer to Jeff if he does, but what I would say is if in essence the nature of that loan is that it's intended to be income replacement for you or for your employees, then it would not be, you couldn't leverage those systems simultaneously. Jeff,
It's not. It's not.
Jeff, do you know anything about this loan program that you can add to this conversation?
I don't. Generally, with PPP, since it's paycheck protection, we know that you can't do that at the same time. Receiving this other type of payments, it's a loan. I honestly don't have a lot of information on potential impact that's there. It's better to err on the side of caution. And so if this is something that you don't know that you're going to receive and that you receive a lump sum payment that comes across, I'll take it as an action item for the UI team and for the PUA team to look into that so that we know how to properly adjudicate those, but err on the side of caution if you receive a lump sum payment other than the stimulus check that we just talked about. But for this program specifically, since we don't have details and we would want to research, go ahead, report it in the week it was received when you file weekly certifications. And then that way we can take a look at it. It shouldn't hold up any future payments. We may have to get some eyes on it to see if there's an impact on the claim. But once we get some more detail on that, we'll be sure to update our frequently asked questions page on our website.
Perfect. So I think we're going to go to some questions that were entered as people registered. And if we have time left, we'll open up the mics. So I think our first question, Jeff, was Amy, a tour guide, is asking, I'm wondering if state or federal unemployment will run out. I do not see myself going back to work until 2021.
Okay, so yeah, that's a great question. So I want to be clear about a few things. One is, let's start with regular unemployment insurance. So there's something called a trust fund, and the employers in the state all contribute to the trust fund. Generally, there's some exceptions, but I won't get into that. And so they pre-fund what's called the UI trust fund that helps to pay benefits. That was at about $1.1 billion before COVID-19, which is a very large amount of money. But in circumstances like this, that money can actually go quite quickly. But what's important to note is that unemployment insurance is backed by the feds. So essentially what that means is even if the states run out of money in their trust fund, which again, it pre-funds situations like this, even if that fund gets completely used up, there's guaranteed borrowing from the federal government to back, if you will, and ensure regular unemployment insurance benefits. So there's no running out of regular unemployment insurance benefits. And I should mention that as it stands right now, typically under normal circumstances, there are benefits for regular unemployment are up to 26 weeks, depending upon if you qualify for that long. That has been extended through Congress, through congressional action, up to 39 weeks. So as it stands right now, you can apply for benefits for up to 39 weeks, depending upon if you are eligible for that long. Now let me talk a little bit about pandemic unemployment assistance, because that's different. Those benefits, as it stands, that's a completely federal program, as I mentioned, and those benefits as it exists right now, they run through December 31, 2020, or actually, to be more accurate, December 26th, 2020. The Congress could take action to extend those benefits. We just don't know. But that's where it stands right now. And mirroring regular unemployment insurance, you can also, if you're eligible to do so, be on those benefits for up to 39 weeks. The last piece that I will mention is the $600 payment. It was in the presentation, but I'll just reiterate it. Right now, the additional $600, the pandemic unemployment compensation, that's $600 on top of everyone's benefits on a weekly basis, and that runs currently through July 25th. We have no idea if that will be extended or if that might be extended on a lesser amount. That's all to be determined by Congress moving forward. Jeff, did I miss anything?
Nope, that was very succinct.
Okay, next question.
Perfect. The next question, John is asking, I'm a 1099 contractor, and the unemployment application is asking me, have I worked in another state since January 1st? How do I answer that question? I'm an event planner and I travel and work in numerous states a year.
So I'm gonna punt this to my colleague Jeffrey. He is far better equipped to answer this than me. So Jeff, do you want to jump in here?
Absolutely. So if you are and I'm going to preface this with some qualifications here. So if you're a 1099 worker, and I'm assuming that's 1099 work only, there's no W-2 work in there. So in this scenario, if you're a pure independent contractor, 1099 worker, and you go into our pandemic unemployment assistance PUA program, it does have a question that asks if you've worked in another state since 1/1/2019. And the purpose of that is to figure out if you have done any covered work in other states. So W-2 work that would be in any other state. If that is the case, since W-2 work is covered work and would potentially qualify you for regular unemployment insurance benefits, it wants you to seek out that program first or to file for a regular UI claim. If you have done 1099 contract work and don't receive a W-2 and you've worked in multiple states, then you don't need to, you can answer no to that question and continue through the claim to file in Colorado. So the purpose of that is really to separate out if W-2 work that may have been done in other states. So we've seen some cases, especially in Colorado, since we have a particularly transient population, we'll have people come in from different states. They may have done some work on a W-2 in another state and then moved to Colorado in 2019. We've come across that situation a lot. And we are finding that those individuals need to file an unemployment insurance claim in the state where they previously lived if they had W-2 work there.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you. A quick question here. We're going to kind of bounce back and forth to see how many we can get answered. I'll kind of loop this one together. If I take funds from my 401k, would that be reported in income? And then does partial income earned reduce your unemployment?
Jeff, do you want to answer those questions?
Yep, I can answer that as well. So if you do take funds out of your 401k, we would look at that, the funds that you received under Colorado law and adjudicate that as a payment that does impact unemployment insurance benefits. So if you receive a 401k payout, we have to look at that. You need to report that in the week in which you received it through your continued claims process or request payment process. And 401k earnings do have an impact, and so it will determine how many weeks of benefits that represents, and it could postpone you from receiving unemployment insurance benefits or PUA benefits for a period of time equal to the amount that you received from that 401k payout. So you need to think carefully before taking money out because it could prevent you from receiving unemployment insurance or pandemic unemployment assistance.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Cynthia has a question regarding changing her application. And I think we have a couple of questions about how to go in and change one of their questions because they've been declined or they're on delayed status. So Cynthia writes, how do I change my application? She is a conference manager. She travels to other conferences and manages the programs on site in these different states. She chose the option of other to the answer of why I was no longer working. And she chose other, and then she put in the explanation in the text box. Is that holding up her application? And can she go in and change it to, I am unable to go back to work due to my business has closed. The place of business has closed.
Yeah, sure. And I can take this one. So what it will do is, we're seeing this a lot, and I think that it could be a potential issue where the question isn't reading as well as we'd like. So it should not hold up the application. It may indicate on the PUA application that you have an issue that was identified, and in some cases we send out a request for additional facts if we need it. If something like that came across, it would show up in my inbox on the application. We are working to adjust the questions right now to make it less, to make it a little bit more clear in that situation. But I would say unless you receive a notice in your inbox, not under correspondence, but on where it says my inbox, it shouldn't be holding anything up at this point. But if you do receive anything in the inbox, just fill out the information electronically there, and it will go back to a UI worker that will review it to clear any issues that might be holding up payment. We don't believe that these are holding payment at this point, but it may be a little confusing because it will show that there is an issue that was generated. This is for us to review because we have to ensure that everybody is continuing to be unemployed or unavailable for work due to COVID. But best advice I can give is respond to any requests for additional information that are listed in my inbox. So we'll send emails from time to time that say, hey, the correspondence was uploaded to you. You need to take a look at that. That's just to let you know that there's something in your correspondence box that has been generated, like a monetary determination form or an adjudication determination. But any action that you need to take, anything that may hold up payment would appear it'll ask you a series of questions called fact-finding questionnaires, and just provide that information. We'll get that updated. But in this specific scenario, yeah, if you choose other, it's an issue for us to take a look at it, but shouldn't be holding up your claim right now.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeffrey. If any listeners have changes and they don't have anything in their inbox and it's holding up your application status, please put it in the chat and we can get you the answer. Nicole, did you have some questions about back pay?
I did. I've got a couple questions here as it relates to back pay. Somebody waited 5 weeks to file thinking they only qualified for PUA. Turns out they qualified for regular. How do you backdate the claim to recover from 5 weeks? And then another waited for unemployment thinking I needed to wait till April 20th as a gig worker, have technically been laid off since the 20th. How do you go back and get the pay since March 20th now?
Sure. Jeff, do you want to chime in on this one as well?
Okay, so there's a couple different scenarios there. One of them, it sounds like somebody waited to file regular unemployment insurance thinking that they were a gig worker, and are now wanting to request back pay or what we call a back date on the claim. Currently, with our unemployment insurance system, the way you're unable to request a back date through that system. You would need to get in contact with us through our customer service center or to sign up for a callback in order to have someone assist you with that process. If you are a gig worker, you qualify for pandemic unemployment assistance. When you file in that application, it asks you about backdating weeks or back weeks. And so you would be able to put in a requested date for when you separated due to the pandemic at that point. And that will take that request into the system to be reviewed or to be automatically applied if it meets certain criteria. And so it's a little bit different depending on which system you're in. But so if it's regular UI, you would need the assistance of an agent to make that modification to your UI claim. If it's under the pandemic unemployment assistance, you should be able to go in and request back weeks. Right now, you'd want to put that in through that PUA process. When it asks, it gives some specific information about making sure if you had regular UI and you had exhausted that, not to cover weeks that were potentially received on a UI claim as well. So it would have to be going from when you had exhausted benefits in UI forward onto the pandemic unemployment assistance. So follow the prompts, put the information in as truthfully regarding either when you became unemployed due to the pandemic or when your regular UI benefits exhausted. And then the system should present those weeks once they're available once they've been reviewed.
And
So-
Jeffrey, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just add into that quickly. So as Jeff said, if you're on regular UI, you're likely going to have to talk to an agent. And so this would be a case where if you're having trouble getting through, which I understand if you are, that's one of the situations where you could go on our website and fill out that filing a claim form on the website, and we will call you back as opposed to you having to call us.
And I know we had a lot of questions regarding getting through to customer service, so we will post the link to that email form in chat shortly. I have a question from Joe. He lives in Colorado for 6 months and Florida the other 6. How does he handle his?
Sure. Jeff, do you want to talk about options for Joe there?
Yep, absolutely. So if you've lived in Colorado for 6 months and Florida for the other 6, which state do I apply for unemployment insurance? So if you have W-2 wages in both states, then you would have a couple of different options. You can file your unemployment insurance claim here in Colorado, and we would do what's called a combined wage claim. It would take the information about your employment in Florida, and when you do that, as part of that process, we run a check to see if you potentially would be qualified for a higher benefit amount in Florida versus Colorado. The same thing would happen if you were to file in Florida. They would check to see. My recommendation is to take a look at both states. Usually we have what's called the benefits estimator on our website. You can search on the Colorado UI.gov. There should be a link for benefits estimator. If not, you can just search for it in the search box and it should get you there. You can input the total wages, Colorado and Florida, and it would let you know what the potential benefit amount is here in Colorado. And you can check Florida's website. They most likely have a similar benefits estimator there, and you can, and this is for W-2 wages only. You can then choose to file in either state, depending on which has a better benefit amount. If this is talking about 1099 work only, then you can file here in Colorado. If you live in Colorado, you could potentially file in Florida as well, since you worked there for 6 months, but you cannot file in both states.
Thank you. Nicole, anything on the chat?
Yes. I've got a couple that I'll try and again combine as it relates to what I'm thinking as maybe a work share situation or reduced work hours. So can someone apply and receive benefits when they are underemployed? Job hours cut by 50% or more. And then another one that's similar. What if we're still working 10 hours a week for our W-2 employer, but I have lost all 1099 income? The regular UI form asks about last day of work. Similar questions don't apply. How do we navigate those questions? Pay has been, another one, pay has been reduced 75% from a W-2 employer.
So I'll start, and then Jeff, I'll ask you to round this out a little bit for me. Yeah, so if you've had you don't have to be completely at 0 hours to potentially qualify for UI benefits. If you've had a reduction in hours such that you're less than full-time, then you are likely going to be eligible for benefits. There are some nuances there where if your earnings are greater than your potential benefit, then you may not be eligible. But if you're cut as much as like 50% or 75%, then in all likelihood, you're going to be eligible for benefits, and you should go ahead and apply. Jeff, would you add anything to that first question?
No, I think you covered that well. So the benefit, we do have rules on where, depending if you have earnings that are continuing, ongoing earnings, they may reduce the amount that you're going to receive for that week. So there's an earnings reduction rule that would reduce up to a certain period. You can earn up to 25% of your weekly benefit amount with no impact to the amount that you would receive for that week, but then anything over that 25% amount is reduced dollar for dollar off potential benefits for the week. If you exceed whatever that weekly benefit amount is, then you wouldn't be eligible for any benefits for that week. And
so it's an important distinction. And I know this sounds dramatic, but it's what the rules are. So in addition to what Jeff said, the $600 is flat. If you're getting any level of benefit, you're also going to be eligible for that $600. Important distinction here: if you're not getting any base benefit, meaning you don't even have $1 worth of benefit, then you're not eligible at all for the $600. So it's essentially a cliff. You have to be getting some level of base benefit to be eligible for the additional compensation, and if that's the case, it's a flat amount. But if you're not getting any underlying benefit, weekly or biweekly, then it's nothing in terms of additional dollars. Jeff, there was a more nuanced question in there that Nicole read about, if memory can serve, only a 10% reduction in W-2 earnings and complete reduction in 1099 earnings. I think that was the gist of the question. That's a more challenging one. Can you get into that?
It is challenging because the way that the law is written is that when you file a claim, we cannot make any predeterminations on your eligibility for one program versus the other, especially if there are W-2 wages that are showing. So you may have lost all of your primary income that was related to gig work or 1099 work, but you had a side part-time job that is ongoing where you're still receiving wages there. That employer may have wages that are covered wages that show up and are reported to the division as regular W-2 work. If the amount is over $2,500 in 2019, then you would then need to file the regular unemployment insurance claim at that point and go through that process. So if your regular work reduces you down 75%, I think Jeff talked about that with regular UI. But if you're primarily a gig worker, you do have regular part-time work that is ongoing, then you may have to file for regular unemployment insurance, and that's going to be based on the amount of money that you earned in 2019. So if it goes above 2,500, you've got part-time work there, you're still working for that part-time employer, you can go ahead and you may need to file for regular unemployment insurance. It'll ask you about that employer, and it's fine to say, there's an option to say I have not separated from this employer. I'm a regular part-time employee. And then as far as the dates of employment, if your last day of work with regular part-time, if you're still continuing to work, I think it's fine to put the last day that you worked at that part-time employer on there. If you're filing a PUA application though, and you don't qualify for regular UI, then you want to put whatever your last date was as of the time you separated or stopped working due to COVID-19.
Can I ask one follow-up as it relates to that? Someone is getting paid one day to cover benefits, but essentially not working at all. So 20% of her weekly gross salary, does this affect the 618 amount if it's being paid to offset benefits?
I'm sorry, you referenced $618. I'm not sure I know what you're talking about.
What is the maximum amount of coverage? They had 618, but I'm guessing.
Oh, max, okay.
Does it affect? Yeah.
Gotcha. Jeff, do you want to get into that?
Yeah. So if you're off work right now, it's 618 is your weekly benefit amount. They work you one day out of the week, just so that you can, to continue coverage of other benefits. You would want to report whatever the equivalent of that one day was in the week in which you worked those hours, so that it properly adjusts for that week only. So if the equivalent of one day's work is less than $618, then you would still get a partial payment for that week. If one day's work is greater than $618, then it may postpone you from receiving benefits or make you ineligible just for that week, but it's not going to close the claim down.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
I have a question from Sven, a small gym owner. This is quite a lengthy question, so instead of reading it all the questions, Jeff, I had sent them to you in advance. But succinctly, Sven is a small business owner and their unemployment claim forms were sent to their business. We are unable to retrieve the forms because of the stay-at-home order. Has the response time been increased? What is the business liability of layoffs? Jeff, maybe you can just go down his list as it will expedite the.
Yeah, so it's hard to know which forms Sven is talking about, so I will address both sides of the equation. If, Sven, if you're talking about the forms as it relates to communication with our division on separations, meaning your employees, and we're sending you communication about the nature of the separation for your employees, and we need facts from you to make a determination on their eligibility for benefits. There's a system you can go into to opt to get all of those communications electronically, and I would encourage you to do that. If you're talking about the premiums that are owed to the division and making payments on those premiums, your quarterly premiums, then I would address this way. We have extended the timelines for payment of those premiums, and we waived all penalties and interest associated with not getting those in a timely manner. So yes, if that is your question, then yes, we have increased the timelines associated with that, understanding that there's challenges getting to work and safer at home, and understanding there's challenges with general mail. What if a business's liability, what is a business's liability if layoffs occurred because of the government closure? Okay, so this is relating, I think, Sven, to your question about the premiums associated with, and your experience rate is what we call it, associated with separations that are occurring during the COVID-19 crisis. So to answer your question, we understand and recognize that essentially, usually when there's a separation, somebody is deemed at fault, meaning either the employee was at fault or the business generally was at fault for the separation. And if a business is deemed to be at fault for a separation, it's going to drive up your premium rates as it relates to paying into unemployment insurance benefits. Recognizing that this is a situation that's essentially beyond anyone's control, it's a pandemic, and therefore it's impacting businesses, and they're having to not employ their workers, not because of actions they've taken, but rather due to the pandemic and due to the governor's orders and so forth. So for the time being, we are not directly attributing any separations to employers' experience rates, meaning what we're doing is we're socializing the costs associated with those rates. So bottom line is, for the period of this situation, any separations that occur between an employer and an employee, those separation costs or premium rates are not being held to your account. What if there's not enough money in the business account to cover all the layoffs due to the governor's stay-at-home order? That I tried to address that in the discussion about regular unemployment insurance. So there's a UI trust fund that, if you're an employer, you're probably well aware of the trust fund because you're paying into that. Even if that fund runs to zero or below, we can borrow from the federal government. Now, what that will, and we can borrow, for the time being, we can borrow interest-free from the federal government. Recognizing the severity of the situation, the feds have extended the period of interest-free borrowing to the states through the end of December. That could be extended. That has yet to be determined, but that's where it stands right now. Now, I want to make it abundantly clear, though, within state law, we have something that's called a solvency surcharge. So if the fund, the trust fund, runs below a certain dollar amount, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $650 million right now. What will happen is we will trigger on what's called a solvency surcharge. And if that happens between now and June, and all evidence demonstrates that will happen between now and June, it will place into effect come January 1st what's called a solvency surcharge. And that's unilateral across all businesses within the state of Colorado. So it's not that your unique premium has gone up, it's that there's a solvency surcharge put in place by state law to help pay into and augment that trust fund. I think that gets into question number 5. Will the business be asked to replenish the fund or be liable for payment over the amounts in their account? So I think I've addressed all of Sven's questions.
Thank you. Nicole, do you have
Thanks,
anything
Jeff.
in chat?
Yeah, I've got another one here as it relates to kind of the music industry, music field. So in the past, anytime a musician filed for traditional unemployment, it triggered an audit or investigation of anyone who had hired them, a bar for one night, another musician who hired them for a gig, etc. Bands operated with 1099 contractors because musicians met every definition of independent contractor status. And apparently doesn't require an applicant to name the names of the entities that hired them. The application does say that the CDLE reserves the right to follow up in the future. Musicians in Colorado who are desperately in need of PUA, they're on the verge of losing their apartments because there's no events or concerts happening. Petrified of applying for PUA because they are worried that eventually they will have to identify the entities that have hired them. And at that point, those entities become subjects of audit. Essentially, they're terrified to apply. Can you tell us whether or not these fears and concerns are founded? Apologize for a forward question, but in the past, the CDLE has developed a reputation for essentially going after these entities, regardless of whether the workers in question met all of the tests of independent contractor status. If you can address that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I'm well aware of the relationship with department and the music industry at large, and the some of the unfortunate history there. I'll be willing to say that. I would say that over the last 5 years, that's evolved considerably in terms of the analysis of the music industry and understanding the unique circumstances relative to the music industry. So without getting into too many rabbit holes, what I will say is a few things. One is I would encourage you to apply for pandemic unemployment assistance and determine if you're eligible for those benefits. I don't want to get into a circumstance where people are terrified that their actions today will have consequences down the road in terms of a redetermination or somebody reclassifying them as a W-2 employee. So I would please encourage you to heed that advice. In terms of our audits, what I can tell you for the time being is we've had to redirect all of our staff to certain key functions. So we've actually suspended audit activity for a period of time. Our more broadly, our audits fall into two classifications: targeted and random. But what I will say in terms of targeted audits, which I think this question was asking about, we really have tried to refine our analyses of unique circumstances and unique industries, such that it's a more nuanced analysis of, is this an independent contractor or is this a W-2 employee? So I would provide that background in that context. I would also note that if you want to get ahead of this situation, online at coloradoui.gov, you will find, if you peruse it a little bit, it might take some time to get to it, but you'll find what we've put in the service called an audit navigator. And that is somebody that can really help you to navigate the contract process. I know that there was a thing in there about, but we followed all the conditions relative to making sure that we were an IC versus a W-2 employee. We've got an expert. It's a she. She can help you to navigate that, such to really make sure that the division and the department are on the same page with you as it relates to your contract, and ensuring that you've dotted all the T's and dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, relative to ensuring that that the systems are in place to ensure that you're an IC. The other thing is you have to do it in fact as well. So I just throw that out there. There are resources out there on the website. You can get in touch with a professional. If you're worried about this now and you want to get ahead of it, I encourage you to use that resource that we put in place.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Where on the website is the chat bot? We've had multiple people say they can't find where that chat bot is that triggers. If you can give us a general direction of where they should look, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, as we're going through this conversation, I'll try to navigate to that, but I'll do my best to get that get that link for you.
And then I know we're a few minutes after 12 right now. How long are you able? We've got still a laundry list of questions. How long are you able to continue on?
I think we can go for about 10 more minutes.
Okay. Lisa, did you have another question?
We have quite a few questions about PINs. How are they received? And if I recall, PINs are only for the regular unemployment insurance, correct? I have payments on it. So Kim is asking, when will I get my PIN? I have payments on a debit card and there is no money on it, even though it shows paid due to the non-funding in the UI system.
So Jeff, I'm going to defer this one to you. There may be a circumstance as it relates to no benefits available in this. So this might be a challenging question to answer for a broad audience. Jeff, do you want to venture a guess here?
Yeah, so if they're saying they have payments on a debit card and there's no money on it, even though it shows paid due to the non-funding in the UI system. So if there are a number of different circumstances here, we sent an email out to several people, and this may have been solved by now or by this point at all. But if you're receiving a PIN, we're talking PIN could be a couple different things. One is the PIN that you would receive if you're on regular unemployment insurance. You'll receive a PIN from that system to get into your account to request payment. That is either, in some cases, generated by mail, or correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, if we have an email on file for you, we'll email that PIN out to you so that you can get into the system. If you have a debit card and you never received a PIN from the issuing bank, I believe we use US Bank, you would want to contact the number using the number on the back of the card to get the PIN for that specific debit card. And then if it shows as paid due to the non-funding in the UI system, I'm a little lost on that one. But specifically regarding PIN numbers, there's two different ones. One would be the PIN that you receive to get into the system. Another one would be a PIN for the card itself that should have been mailed separately. If you didn't receive the PIN for accessing that debit card, be sure to call the customer service number on the back of the card.
Okay, and she has a follow-up question, which I think is, it's good for the group. The first part of it is, when do I need to begin to look for work? So if you could address that, and remember, most of us are conference-related contractors, and our work is unforeseeable in the near future. So when do I need to begin to look for work? As well, in her case, she is taking care of two elderly parents with compromised systems.
Right.
So two parts.
Okay, so I'll try to address this, and Jeff will round it out if I leave anything out. Okay, so hard to know if that's a it sounds like that person was a independent contractor or self-employed, as opposed to a W-2 employee. Am I correct in that assumption?
I have to look at her full email.
Okay.
I can't remember.
That's okay. I'll try to address it from both perspectives. All right. So if you're, what we've done right now, given the circumstances of COVID-19, there's a few overarching principles that apply to circumstances for being eligible for unemployment compensation. One is you have to be able and available to work. And so that's just, again, an underlying concept within unemployment is that you can't be essentially detached from the labor market. But able and available takes on a new definition as it relates to COVID-19 because of things like shelter at home, safer at home, things along those lines. So what we've done is we've relaxed the constraints in terms of able and available. Essentially what it is you need to be able and available, generally speaking, given the circumstances of COVID-19. Okay. One thing I will note here that's important to know is that if your employer offers you the opportunity to work full or part-time remotely and gives you the tools and resources to do so, whether you want to or not, you cannot stay on unemployment insurance benefits. So if they say, I've set you up so you can work virtually from home full-time, bring you back to work, get your old job back, you can work remotely. You cannot say, no, I'd prefer not to work remotely and I'd like to just stay on unemployment insurance benefits. That's not going to work. Even if you've got a child at home, well, I should say, assuming you don't have somebody that you're caring for that has COVID-19, that's not going to work. Okay. So absent you actually taking care of somebody with COVID-19, simply your child's at home, you're going to have to take that job. Otherwise your benefits are going to be impacted. But what we've done is the other thing you have to be doing, generally speaking, to get benefits is to actively seek work. We've also put a temporary suspension on that. We are going to ask you to register, whether you're on PUA or regular UI. We're going to ask you to register with Connecting Colorado, which is the state job bank. It's gonna push some jobs to you that might be suitable for you. You don't have to take any of the jobs if you don't feel like that they're appropriate. And if you're committed to your self-employment, to your independent contractor work or your gig work, you don't have to take those jobs just because they're W-2. We're not going to force you to take those jobs, okay? But if you get an offer for work and you're a traditional employee, and you refuse that work, I sort of started in this in the intro. It's going to set an issue where we're going to examine the circumstances of, is it safe you go back to work, so forth and so on. Slightly different circumstances if you're strictly a 1099 worker. We of course we encourage you, as is safe and appropriate, and you're the one that's going to make the determination on that. As is safe and appropriate, we encourage you to go back and start doing gig work, assuming you feel comfortable doing it. Okay, and if you do start to get partial earnings, as Jeff talked about and I talked about, if you do start to get partial or full earnings, then you're going to have to report that because it's going to impact your certification process and your ability or it may impact or lessen your benefits on a weekly basis. So I think I've generally tried to answer that across both spectrums of PUA, W-2 worker, independent contractor. So hopefully that answers the question at large. I think we got time for one more question.
I'll combine a couple into one, as they're all related to kind of that $600, which is the stipend coming from the federal government. One relates to PPP. If they file for regular unemployment, are they still eligible for the $600? Somebody's receiving checks, the $600 was not included. Understand the $600 backdated. And then another one, if the 474 qualifies, is the $600 affected as well? I got 4 and in 1.
Yeah, so sorry, that was a little bit hard to follow. So let's see here. The $600, regardless of what your underlying benefit is, you should be eligible for the you would be eligible, excuse me, for the $600 weekly. In terms of the time period for that, it goes back to March 29th. So if you were on benefits, or if your claim is backdated for benefits going back to March 29th, that would be the first week that you'd be eligible for those additional $600. So the time period is March 29th to July 25th, where you can currently get the $600.
And Jeff, I put them in the chat feature just to you, that series of 4 questions, if you want to.
Yeah, so contractor work, would I not qualify for that weekly 474? I'm not sure I'm understanding that question. Jeff, do you have the answer to that?
The weekly 474, I mean, I'm assuming that is this person's weekly benefit amount that was determined. And so this is just generally, I know there were a number of different questions in there. If the PPP program, if you're using that to replace pay, then you wouldn't be eligible for PUA during that time. So you, likewise, since you're not eligible for PUA, you would also not be eligible for the PUC, which is the $600. If you have contract work, and I'll take this example, assuming that 474 was that $474 was the weekly benefit amount that you receive, and you say you got a gig or you did some gig work during the week, if you earned 474 or more, then that would also make you ineligible for the $600 payment.
Got it. Well, gentlemen, we absolutely appreciate your time here today, and I think we could probably continue for hours, but respect that you guys have got to go back and continue to get some work done. Lisa did put a chat in the chat function where that chat bot lives. The chat box link is in there as well. And then someone else asked for the link to the callback form, which I'm guessing is that chat box link. Is that correct?
I sent that one in as well. So you should have both links. Yeah, I think I sent in both those links.
Okay. I'll
Okay.
find it.
And just
We'll make sure that
generally,
information gets put out as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, generally, from my own experience going on our website, if you click on the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance link, that chat bot pops up in the lower right-hand corner. So just browsing through our website, if you go to coloradoui.gov and then click on File Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, I know the chat bot pops up immediately.
Wonderful. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it. Everyone on the call, thank you for your time. We will try to, again, summarize best we can, look for information, usually within 24 hours coming out from our team. We'll put links and that additional information in here as well. Thanks, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.